All right, Karissa, welcome to Soccer Appetite, my experience. This is about you, Karissa King, for everyone out there listening and checking out the channel. This is about being able to take away the experiences of players or coaches or parents and being able to maybe better help yourself with finding solutions that you may come across with challenges within your journey within soccer. So today we have Karissa King. Um, so I'm gonna actually just start by saying that I remember being in Ventura, coaching against you, and I believe we actually tied the game 0-0. And main reason, the reason is because this little tiny blonde girl, we could not get by you. And if we did, you would catch up and you would just shut us down. So tell me a little bit about that, because I know that's maybe when you first started playing. But like, I mean, you must have been at that point in time like 9 or 10. So tell me a little bit about like when you started and to that point before, I kind of recruited you.
Yeah, so I started playing soccer when I was 11, actually, a little later
Mm.
than most kids start. And then that game specifically, that was after my first year of playing. I played ASO for like 6 or so months. So that was the first year that I got on a club team. Yeah, that was the first club team that I got invited to be on in my hometown. And it was my first experience of playing soccer competitively and being around girls that started to push me and make me better, and like being under a coach who actually understood soccer a little bit more. And then, yeah, do you want me to go into how you recruited me?
Well, before we get into that, so I
Yeah.
remember gymnastics was your first passion, or that was your first, I would say, like sport that you really got into, and which maybe kind of ties into just in general, like competing at such a young age. But correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons why you started playing soccer was you were getting kind of burned out with gymnastics.
Yeah. Um, I did gymnastics for 3 years at a very high competitive level. I got to a level 7. So technically, most people only get to level 4. And then after level 7, you go up two more levels and then you're like, that's an Olympic level. So I was like training, like, I wanted to go to the Olympics with gymnastics. And I was homeschooled at the time. And so I was spending like over 30 some hours in the gym as like an 8-year old. And there was just one day I remember I like woke up and I was like, I do not want to do this anymore. So, and it was just like that. It was literally like overnight. And so, and my parents thankfully were like supportive of it. And like I love gymnastics and the roots and like the coordination that I learned from it. But then I needed a break and I took like a 6-month break before I started playing soccer. So,
Yeah, I mean, I remember you said that it was hours, right? The training that you were doing with gymnastics, which I mean, I understand too if you're really trying to get to that level. I mean, balance is always important, but it sounds like also, I mean, now that you can look back, was it also just maybe not as much like you weren't in love with it as much as maybe you thought you were?
for sure. It was my first exposure to like a sport, especially at a competitive level. And so um, I didn't really have that variety of knowing what I really wanted. So yeah, when I started playing soccer, I really fell in love with that sport. So and God gifted me with a lot of talents that aligned well with the sport of soccer. So it worked out.
So what was it about soccer when you started playing before I recruited you? Because I mean, you were a headache. I mean, oh my gosh, I remember literally being like, "Who is that little girl?" Because like you were smaller too, back
Mhm.
then. So what was it that you kind of started to fall in love with the game? Like, what was it about?
Well, initially I was just really good at it. So I was that, like you said, small, super quick. I was very, very fast. And so that went very well with the sport of soccer. There's a lot of running in soccer for those of you that don't know. And but then after, as I started to get more involved with it, I loved the team dynamic of it.
Mm.
Gymnastics is more individual. And then when I picked up soccer, I loved being on a team in a team environment. having people to support you, you being able to encourage others. Uh, like now that I'm like 23, I still, there's no other environment that gives you that competitive, encouraging team environment. I also really love about soccer how it's cross cultural. So like you
Mm,
can be anywhere. You'll just be at a park and you can like make friends with people you meet for the first day because you both love soccer. So
mhm,
I really love that part of the sport as well. Um, and it's just like it's a flow game. So it's always moving. There's always like sure there's different patterns and scenarios that you can practice and run through, but there's never like one exact scenario. So I really love that about soccer too, how it's like it's constantly changing. There's always ways to be more creative or something new to learn.
mm.
Um, yeah.
And so after you stopped us from trying to beat your team, uh, I proceeded to call your mother for about a year, maybe a little bit less than a year, and just kept knocking on the door. Talk about recruiting. Oh my gosh. Now that I look back on it, that's pretty funny. So eventually you decided to make a switch. What was that transition like, kind of from playing in your hometown and going to a little bit of a bigger club? What did you feel? What was the difference? How did you handle, that move?
Yeah, so there were two main things that probably why it took so long. One was the relationships. You know, it was my first club team. A lot of those people lived in my hometown. Like two of them were like some of my best friends. So there was an aspect of like loyalty I felt. So I didn't want to like just be like ditching them for the grass is greener on the other side. I wanted to
Mhm.
really make sure like this was going to be a good decision. The other major holdback was the finances for me. I come from like a divorced home, and so like single mom income was like a real thing for me. And so I knew that going to a different club was going to be more expensive. And so those were like the two big things with getting recruited. Obviously, those of you who know Mike, though, he's a great convincer. And so,
Oh
so
boy.
I've done a lot of research on the club too, a lot of good things, and so I ultimately did decide to switch. Mike was going to be my coach, and I was going to know a few of the girls there, and I was going to get some scholarship money too, which was going to be huge in helping me. So
Mhm.
those three things helped, and then yeah, it ended up being a great decision for my soccer development.
Yeah, I think the financial part of it, for a lot of people, they're not maybe as prepared or aware of what truly comes with everything when you play at a club level, regardless of the club, because you have club fees, uniform costs, referee fees for tournaments, maybe travel costs. It's not just a blanket, one-time fee. It's kind of like it is really though like an investment, in terms of depending on how far you want to go. And I think, at what point in time for you did it become known to yourself, then also to your family, that you wanted to go as far as you could with the game?
Um, Yeah, I don't think there was like a clear like moment for me with that. It was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of the next step for me.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of people that like saw potential in me. And honestly, like I said, I just love the game. So I was like, okay, anything that's going to get me to play soccer longer. I'm like, okay, so that means college here in the US. So that, I guess when I started thinking about college, which was probably like the end of my freshman year of high school, that was when I was more like, okay, I should probably be going to like more showcases, and things like that. But even before I had college on my radar, I always wanted to get better. Soccer was also like my escape growing up. And so I was like obsessed and spent like so many hours at the field. And I think that obviously helped with my improvement, like physically, because like I started the game later. And so my technical abilities were always more behind. And I relied on my like speed much more than the average soccer player.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I was just playing a little bit of catch up. But I knew I wanted to play in college. So I put in the work.
I think, yeah, what's great with what you just said, it's like you really were just obsessed with the game, which is why I wasn't surprised that you ended up going to where you wanted to go in terms of like a certain level for college. Talk to me a little bit about, you kind of mentioned like you always felt like you were playing catch up. So when you started to go to showcases and started to display your talents, what were you thinking? Were you thinking I could, go to this school because I fit in completely, or did you have a little bit of also a little bit of a doubt, like I gotta also work on this though if I really want to be impactful when I get there?
Um, I knew I was going to college. For me, it was just the level that I wanted to play at. So that's when like started probably like I don't know sophomore junior year. I knew I wanted to play Division 1. So
Mm,
at that point, I knew I needed to be on a certain team to get that exposure because the Division 1 coaches aren't going to be going to the B team's games in the club.
mm,
So that's another part of my story is I did not make the top team of my age group in my club until my senior year. So my junior, sophomore year, I played up an age group just because that team needed more players and I had a better relationship with that coach. And so I had to work really hard to make the top team in my club, but I still got that exposure because I played an age group up that year before. Um, but yeah,
So you pretty much knew you had to do certain things to align yourself to put yourself in a position. So you knew eventually you had to make an A team because that team was going to get exposed. And then the only option you had was to play up, or that was an option. And so that option worked out. But I think what's also great though is that because you played on a B team for so long, you played probably almost every minute unless there was an injury or you got hurt or something was going on. So you developed a lot by playing on the B team, which then eventually led you to put yourself in a position once you got to the A team to not just make the A team, but to, show that you deserve to be on the field and to impact. So I think those who are listening, it's like if you don't make the A team right away, but if you truly love the game, you're just going to keep playing. Like you're just going to do whatever you have to do. And you would train at other coaches' training sessions. I remember that clear as day. I remember looking over and being like, is that King? I'm like, I wasn't even surprised. I was more just like acknowledging to myself, like, man, this player is just obsessed. Um, so as you started to get exposure and you got recruited to go to Vanderbilt, did you have other options or was that like, boom, done?
yeah. I had several D2 schools that were very serious. And then my other top two, like D1 schools, were Columbia and Gonzaga. Um, at the end of the day, though, like Vanderbilt checked a lot of my boxes. I was looking for a really good academic school, and they're actually like their soccer was better than Columbia because they're not officially an Ivy League, even though they're academically more prestigious than most Ivy Leagues.
Hmm.
So it gave me a better athletic opportunity and then the academic experience. And then I was always open to going out of state. I know a lot of people are not from California. I remember a lot of my teammates are just like, no, like I don't want to go out of state. And so I think being open minded to like leaving also gave me some more opportunities. Um, but yeah, and then also again, the financials were a huge part for me as well. So Vanderbilt was able to offer me like almost it ended up being like 90% or so that got covered. So some of that was financial aid. Some of I would not have gotten into the school without soccer because the average person on their SAT score is like a 1600 at that school. And like I'm intelligent, but I'm like not that type of book smart. And so that's also another huge part of my story is I had to practice the SAT for about 6 months until I finally got a score that Vanderbilt accepted. And I was taking like a practice test every week and I was studying on top of my homework and practice. And so that was like, oh, that was a horrible time. But was like my
Because it
score,
wasn't soccer. It wasn't soccer. You're
I
like,
was
oh, I
like,
have to do, I
yeah.
have to do actually school stuff. Okay.
And my score was only improving like barely a little bit each time. And so it was like a lot of work, low reward, or not low reward, but like didn't see the immediate results. And so, but at the end of the day, they saw that I was putting in the effort and that that I was getting at least a little bit better. And so, hey, it got me in. So, yeah,
So for those also who don't know you, you were also homeschooled,
yeah.
which I think is, I don't want to say it's rare, but I mean, I've been coaching club for now 15 years and I'm trying to think. I mean, you're the first comes to mind. I mean, I'm sure there might be one or two, but not very common. So would you say that homeschooling helped you, didn't help you, or maybe it was indifferent to, because I know also now that we got you into Vanderbilt, or you got yourself into Vanderbilt, um, I'm so proud of you, by the way, for doing all that work. I didn't know all that. See, that even I don't know that. But your grades, I remember though, you said you were struggling, or it was definitely not easy. So what was that like going from a homeschool lifestyle of education, having to grind, catch up? Sounds like you're doing a lot of catch up, and then, but you were persistent. So now you got in. Boom! Now you're in Vanderbilt. You're attending the school. You're playing at Division 1 level, and now you also have classes. What's that all like?
Yeah, that first semester was pretty hard. I came in super fit. Um, soccer was great until I was on academic probation. So, again, you kind of touched on it. Being homeschooled, we did not have a lot of testing as a part of our curriculum. So
Mm,
we had a lot of memorization. It was very Socratic in method, which means like it's discussion based. And so we didn't
mm,
have a lot of like standardized testing. And so when I went to Vanderbilt, and like the majority of your scores are based off of your tests. And so like I would do great on all the assignments and I can write a paper, no problem. But I found I had a big weakness in testing. And so I got a few tutors, but honestly, that just came with experience. So that was something that maybe I wish I had a little bit more growing up, was more testing to prepare me for a school like that.
mm,
Um, and then I did. I got better. I got better at testing, and then I switched out of some classes, which helped. Um, who knew, right? I had taken Calc 1 at our local community college, BC, and then
mm-hmm.
I go and take Calc 1 at Vanderbilt. Completely different story. So that was part of like what put me on academic probation. I'm like, dang. Um, so yeah, just learning how to take tests, because like you can know the information, but honestly, test taking is like a skill in itself, is what I've learned. And then yeah, just picking the right classes that are a good fit for you too.
Mm.
So
Talk to me a little bit about the soccer part. Like, so we know what's going on with the schooling part. Difficult, but again, you're persistent and you push through. You did mention you got on academic probation, which for all those who are listening, yes, that can happen. Um, what was it like? Like your first session, your first kind of realization of what it's like the amount of players that are there, having a new coach, his style, or her style. What what was like the soccer like the first year that you were there?
I loved it. I really did. Like preseason, I loved preseason. It was nothing but soccer. And it was like just getting back in shape, except for the humidity. Okay, so I'm
Mm,
from Southern California, right? And Vanderbilt's in Nashville, Tennessee. I will never forget my freshman preseason in like 97-degree and then like 98% humidity. And I'm like, I was dying a little bit. And it wasn't like because my fitness was bad. It was literally just I was not used to that type of heat.
mm,
And so a lot of hydration. But going back to your question, but coming into obviously like a D1 program, um, again, I felt like I was playing a little bit more catch up with my technical side again. I was there with the with like, again, the fitness and like my speed always helped me, but I think at that point, I wish I had had a little bit more tactical awareness. And then it was very physical. So Vanderbilt's in the SEC, which is known as one of the more physical conferences. And I remember getting slammed. I was still like pretty small at that point too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big challenge, was learning how to hold my own against girls that have already been there for 3 years and are used to this. So, but other than that, the soccer, I really loved the first like 2 years. Loved it. So,
I do remember I went to one of your games. You played Irvine. I remember sitting with your younger sister. I know your mom was there, your dad was there. Um, what advice do you have? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what advice do you have for players who want to play at Division 1 level? What would you say got you in? And then what? I mean, again, you touched on it, so I don't want to. But like, now that you've been through that, what are the boxes? Because athletically, you're gifted. You know, so technically, you said you had to play catch up. So for someone who is, let's just say, an average athlete, but they have a dream to play in Division 1, what advice would you give someone?
um, well, the first thing, I feel like we've talked about this before, but is like your grades. Most coaches, like, you can be the best soccer player, but they won't consider you if you do not have a good GPA. So I would say, at college, we had like a list of standards. It was like your health, your family, and then school and soccer. They're like right here at college. So, like, yes, soccer is very important, but school is also very important. As with
Mm,
my story, if your school is not good enough, you don't get to play soccer. So, when you're on academic probation, you do not get to play in games. So, I would say, so just like, don't disregard your academics. And then another piece of advice I think is just like finding the right fit for you,
mm,
because a lot of people will just go to a school because of the name, or it's because it's where their parents want them to go. But I think like visiting the school and really learning the school's values is going to enhance your experience
mm.
and the soccer program that's already there. So um, yeah, and then just working on what you need to work on. So for me, it was my technical side I needed to work on. So, I had a ball in my front yard that I used, or like Mike said, I stayed for multiple practices just to get more touches on the ball because that's what I needed. Um, but if you have something else you need to work on, it's just finding like unique ways to get those in.
Um, so you transitioned a little bit with your college experience. So I don't know it intimately enough to speak about it. So I'm kind of going to let you take the floor on it. But so you were at Vanderbilt for 2 years and then you transferred.
No, I was there. I was there for the 4 years. I graduated.
Mm. So you,
I
okay.
Yeah.
But did you play all 4 years of your eligibility?
I didn't play my end of my junior year. I
Mm.
stopped playing. And then my senior year, I came back and I was just a practice player.
Mm.
So, I mean, COVID had a big part of this, is also what happened.
Sure.
So, after I played a lot my freshman, sophomore year, the end of my sophomore year, like right before, like the spring, everyone knows, whatever, COVID happened. So we all got sent home. When I came back my junior year, my mom was having a lot of health problems that summer, and we actually like weren't sure she was going to make it. And so I remember I had driven my car from California to Tennessee, and I had just gotten to Tennessee. I'm like doing my physical, like all the things I have to do before preseason, and my uncle calls me. He's like, hey, like you might want to come home. I'm like, dude, I just got to Tennessee. Like, what? And so I like email my coaches, I call my mom. And so I got on a flight that next day after I had just driven out to go home and be with my mom for 2 weeks. And this was like during like preseason. And so I missed like the whole week and a half of preseason, which is like huge.
Mm,
And so when I finally did get back, it was so many COVID restrictions too.
mm,
And that low key a little bit drove me crazy. It was like, oh, we're having a season, we're not having a soccer season. Like no one knew. Half the country was shut down, half the country was still open and playing. California had already canceled sports, but the South was like, no football, we're having a season. And so at this point, it was literally every day of meetings like, you're not having a soccer season, you're not having a soccer season. I'm like, so for me, it ended up just being like a personal decision for me. And I actually went home. So all of my classes were online because of COVID. Vanderbilt had no in-person classes. So they were all over Zoom. The only reason I was in Tennessee at that point was for soccer, and we weren't even having a soccer season. And then we weren't allowed to leave your room. So you were stuck in your room or on the soccer field.
jeez.
And it was miserable. And so I decided to go home. After I went home, I found out the SEC did have a half season. They played certain teams, not all teams, but there was still like a championship of the SEC.
Mhm.
So technically, I missed a lot of that season. I was there for like 2 months with the team before I decided to opt out officially. But that was something they gave athletes an option to do, was to opt out, and so it ended up being a better personal decision for me. So then I came back my senior year, and then coach was like, you've been gone. You're not really the player I recruited. I was like, okay, you know what? I just want to graduate, but I know I want to transfer and keep my eligibility. And I still love the girls on the team. So like, I still went to every practice, like every team event. I just didn't play in any games my senior year to save my eligibility. So then, but I still graduated. So I graduated with my Vanderbilt degree. So technically played two 2 years and whatever 2 months there, and then transferred to get my master's with my eligibility.
So talk to me about now you transferred
Hmm.
and where did you transfer to?
So I transferred to a small NAI Christian school in Lakeland, Florida.
So
There
hold
was a
on.
few,
So
yeah,
Division One
yep.
NAIA. That
Yeah.
is tell me more because wow. Yeah, tell me more.
So on a competitive level, I would say we're about on a D2 competitive level. There's like a D2 school right around the corner, and they won't play us because we beat them so badly every year. So like yes, it's an NAIA school, but it is still very competitive in that sense to where I didn't feel like the level. Yes, it's different, but the quality soccer is still very much there.
Hmm.
um, which is also a good note to people looking to schools. Like, don't just disregard an NAIA school because it doesn't have that NCAA Division One label on it. It can still be a very great soccer program if it's the right fit for you. But yeah, um, so yeah, my at that point when I graduated Vanderbilt, for those of you that don't know me, my faith is a big part of my life, and so I graduated, and God very much called my life in a different direction. And I knew I wanted to pursue a ministry degree. So when I was looking to get my master's, I knew I wanted to go to a Christian college at this point. And I loved living in the South. And so I was like, okay, we'll try Florida next. Um, so those were like two things that were a plus for me, Southeastern. It was a Christian school, it was in the South. And then I talked with the coach, and I just remember the coach like he made me feel very valued. He valued me like as a person before he had even like seen me play, which was
Mm.
so different from like my recruiting process than before. It was like they only care about you as like a soccer player or a student. And so seeing that he valued like me as a person was like something I had gotten glimpses of that, but not like that high of a priority. And that was really cool.
Mm.
Um, and then Also, my boyfriend had been at the school for a semester before, and that wasn't like top reason, but that was like, next to
Mhm.
second reason too. We
Mhm.
had been doing distance for like a year and a half. So I transferred here. I'm getting my master's in family ministry, and I will graduate in December. So
Man, what a journey so far. What's interesting is what came to my mind. We haven't said the word professional, and I do know vaguely. I remember speaking to you about that idea of that. Um, is it the path you're going down that you feel is calling you more, or did you earlier on in your life kind of say that you weren't thinking that far in advance? Talk to me a little bit about, has that ever been in your thought process about playing professional now that it's has gotten to the point where it is now, where I went to a game yesterday and saw Kiki, and it was awesome yelling for her from the sideline and getting yelled at by the home fans. So has that thought process ever kind of gone through your head?
yeah, that's definitely gone through my head before. Maybe thinking about going pro at different times. I would say, like, as I was younger and getting better, I would say I definitely didn't think I was good enough at that point.
Hmm.
Because like I kind of mentioned before, like I was constantly like always playing catch up in my soccer development years.
Hmm.
And so going pro was always like if it happens, it'll happen type thing. It wasn't something that I ever like planned for or specifically worked for. It was always just college.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know about now if I would consider going pro. It's a different environment, and maybe, but
What
there's
would
some other things I love too. So
Sure. No, I know. I mean, and that's what's great about you, is that it's not just all soccer, which is okay if it is for other people too. I think you have a lot of balance for yourself. Um, if you were to go pro, or to go on a trial and try to play somewhere, what would you immediately start to work on? It sounds like the technique would be your first answer, but um, did you ever like break down film at Vanderbilt, or even at your current school? What would you do to prepare yourself for going into the pros?
those are kind of like two questions. But yeah, we did watch film in Vanderbilt a lot of mostly like scouting reports of like the other team
Mm,
and ourselves when we needed to improve on things.
mm,
Here at Southeastern, Coach watches a ton of film. He doesn't have us watch it as much. He'll send us clips here and there, but he does a lot of the analysis himself, and then he'll tell us his interpretation of it. So that, and for the most part, they're like always accurate and saves us time not having to like scroll through the whole game. But I've always loved watching film myself.
mhm,
I've learned a lot about my like positioning on the field from that, because I feel like that's kind of the only way you can learn that is by either watching or just having a ton of experience. And so I didn't have a lot of that experience, and so I had to watch film to make up for that. Now that I have more experience, now those like the watching and the experience has really helped me. Um, but yeah, if I were to go pro right now, I'd probably, yeah, one, start with watching film of the team that I'd want to try out for,
mhm.
see their style of play and how I can improve their program. And then two, I would get on top of my like first touch. So I would just freshen that up, even though like I'm still playing, so like that's still pretty current for me, but I would just put in a little bit more work on that. And
Mhm.
then if someone thankfully I've been gifted with like not having to worry about my fitness too much. And like I work, not saying it comes naturally, I work super hard on it, but like thankfully I've never had to like really struggle with it.
Mhm.
But if that is a struggle for you, I would say get super fit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see you, try, you know what I mean? But at the same time, like, you know yourself and you know if it's in your heart to go down that path. I would love to see the last name King on a jersey. And then you can have so many different, like, you know, quotes or like just sayings about you being like the king. But then again, you're such a humble person that you probably wouldn't do that. Going back to your positioning, so because you were so fast, where did you always find yourself playing?
I played on the outside for the most part. I
Mm.
got put in the midfield a few times, and that was a struggle bus. Um, I would
Yeah, that
say,
wouldn't go through my head. I was like,
let's just
no.
say, other people play that position way better than me, so we'll just let them stick there. Um, but no, it's been funny actually. Like my 2 years I played hardcore at Vanderbilt, and then now here we've been playing a 3-5-2, which fits very well with how I like to play. So I play that outside winger position, and so I'm all the way down the field, all the way up the field. Um, and it just fits really well with like my speed and my like minds. I really like to like take players on 1v1, so it really helps me coming like from the sideline attacking. And um I like to score goals, but I would say I'm actually more of like an assister. I love to like put crosses in on the ground. And so I've always done a lot better coming from the outside and then getting balls in for someone else to finish. So
I have two things that just came to my mind. It's like that's so not shocking because of like who you are. Like I'm sure people who are actually listening to you right now who don't know you, I'm sure they're probably some of them are like completely relating with like your faith and your background. It's like I can just yeah, you're like yeah, get it to me on the weak side. I'll go 1v1 and then I'll serve it in and someone else can tap it in. Um, I can yeah, that pretty much sums you up right there. But what's interesting too is I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. How do you go from you right now to training slash playing? Because I tell players all the time, if you act the same way when you're at the dinner table with your family as you are competing in certain environments, you're never going to compete. So you almost have to shift and you have to put yourself in a different mindset. Um, because what was interesting about you is that knowing who you are as a person, but then as you are on the field, like you are two different people. I mean, doesn't mean if someone got hurt that you're not going to be the first one to go over and make sure that they're okay. I mean, that would be you. But at the same time, like you have that relentless mentality where, again, like 1v1, like you're trying to beat that person. You're doing everything you can. Like it's physical. You're using your arm, your body, right? So is that natural for you? Have you even kind of thought about that, about your ability to naturally go into that mode?
not really. I've always been very resilient just because of some of my life experiences, and so I think some of that translates onto the field,
Mm,
just like that ability to just keep going and going. Um, in terms of like a mindset, I mean, sure, there's like some routines and things I do, but it's actually something I've had to work on, I would say, in my personal life. So
mm,
I started out like highly, highly competitive. So that was great for soccer, right? But I remember this time in seventh grade where I like completely hurt someone's feelings beyond what was absolutely necessary just because I was so competitive. And so that was something like through a lot of prayer that I've actually grown a lot
mm,
in my away from the field time. And
mhm.
so that's helped me grow as a person. But then I would say, and obviously that it's grown on the field too, but on the field it's more appropriate to act that way. So yeah.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, that's. I mean, I love how just honest you are about your experience. But would you say that between Division 1 and your current school, I don't even want to call it NAIA. It sounds like, I mean, obviously they're not Division 1 level. It sounds like, I mean, I think maybe you would agree with me on that, but they're
Yeah.
close. They're knocking on the door. What's the difference? Like, what's the difference between Division 1, not even just say Vanderbilt, but just what's the difference between Division 1 and then the school you're at now, even though it's classified as an NAIA, but you say it's more Division 2.
Mhm.
What is the difference?
The first thing that comes to mind is the physicality.
Hmm.
It's not quite as physical. Um, and then I would say you just have a little bit more variety of the players you're going to see in the locker room. So we're not all that standard super athlete, like so good at soccer. There's a little bit more variety. Like someone's here because they're a great person, like, or they're here because like their siblings on the team. And like maybe they don't play as much, but they still bring a huge aspect to the team, and the team would not be the same without them. And so that's something, I mean, obviously, like I care about people and I'm very relational. So I actually really love that aspect versus like in the D1 environment. Um, there's a little bit, it's not as like a family as much because it's a little more cutthroat. Like we're both fighting for this spot and I might hate you because of that. So I would say at the NIA level, there's a little bit more maybe not as good as soccer, but I'm going to support you because I know I still have value on this team because not all my value is wrapped up in me starting. So,
Going back to the physicality part, um, piece of it, is that because of the refereeing in terms of letting things go? Um, because obviously, let's say if it was physical and the referee started calling it a lot more, then I'm assuming players would adjust, coaches would adjust. Um, or is it the refereeing? Is it the style of play? Is it maybe more direct, a little bit more balls over the top, a little bit more running onto things, more 1v1 battles? Like what makes it physical?
uh, honestly, I don't think the girls are as big. I think D1, like a lot of coaches are looking for like that ideal like athlete, like honestly like
Mm,
a body type. Um, that's like the first thing because no, there's still obviously there's still fouls and like injuries and it's still physical. Don't get me wrong, like it's still physical. It's just not like I don't come home from a game covered in bruises. I come home with like one on my arm instead of like a Charlie horse in my thigh and like a gash on my forearm. So it's just yeah,
but
you don't
I guess what I'm trying to like, well, what makes it physical? Like, is it the athlete?
yeah, part of it's yes.
Is it the mentality?
Part of it's the athlete, and then I guess it comes a little bit to like the style of play. So like your everyone at the D1 level is like like kind of like tackling each other. I remember like at practices we had like a no rules practice where you would legit tackle people just so that we could get that like toughness.
Mm,
And so which like I think is fine, but I appreciate the side of soccer that is like, hey, let's pass the ball. And so
mm,
um like I like that part of NI a little bit more, where we can focus on the technical side a little bit more and not have to be in the weight room lifting super heavy in order just to hold your own to take your first touch. So, like, I don't have to put in as much time in the weight room playing NI versus Division 1.
um, what would you say is like the schedule difference between Division 1 and NAIA in terms of, you mentioned right there like the weight room. Um, what was like an, let's say, an average day at, say, Vanderbilt and an average day at your current school?
They're similar.
Mm,
For me, it's different because I'm now getting my master's, and so the class schedules are different versus when I was at Vanderbilt, it was my undergrad. So, at Vanderbilt, you would have it would alternate. So you'd have like morning practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then like evening practice Tuesday, Thursday. So like on Monday, you would wake up. I would wake up at like 5:15 because you had to be in the locker room at 5:30 for your 6 a.m. practice.
Mm.
So your day started pretty early, and then you have a 2-hour practice. So you're on the field from like 6 to 8. Some girls had to like leave practice early because they had a class, and like that was okay and understandable.
Mm.
Um, but then you would leave practice, and then you kind of had to choose some days whether you wanted breakfast or recovery because like the dining hall for breakfast is only open for so long. So some days you were like sprinting to the shower or maybe not taking a shower so that you go get breakfast versus other days you like you needed to get in the training room and like do the boots or an ice bath. And so like even though practice is 2 hours, it's really like a 3-hour block out of your day because you have to change and recover and or get food. Um, and then you have classes. So like Mondays, I usually have like 3 different classes you got to go to. Sometimes you have a night class. Mine thankfully were like all during the day. And then um, sometimes it's like I remember like eating a bowl on my way to class because I was like, oh, I gotta get food, but I have 20 minutes to get to my next class. So I was like walking or jogging and eating at times. I felt like I'm like, this is not yeah. I don't think it was totally healthy at the time, but it's what we did. So and then you bring your food, class, and then after class, you have homework. So we had a lot of homework at Vanderbilt, a lot. And you spend like probably 3 hours a day doing homework, like reading or going to a tutoring session, and you don't go to sleep till like probably 11, 12 p.m. some nights. And then you're up the next day. So I liked to get up every like the same time every day. It just helped with my consistency. And then on those days we didn't have early practice. That's when I would do like my time in the Word, or I would do some extra core or bands. On some days when I was feeling good, I would go to the field and do some extra work if I could. Um, Also, as a freshman, you have mandatory study hall hours. We had
Mm-hmm.
10 hours a week you had to spend in the study hall. So you go and clock into your study hall when you could, um, and then you get ready for practice. You had to be in the locker room at least 30 minutes, at least. I was always like the first one in the locker room way before that, though. I bring my homework in there, like do my bands. But um, early because you like if you're I don't even know what would happen if someone was late to practice. I can't even like imagine that happening because it's like it does not happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we kind of got all that out in preseason because preseason is a little different. Some people were like late to meals, and if you're late to meals, there's like consequences, and that kind of just like sets the standard for the rest of the season. But
Mm-hmm.
yep, you're not late to practice. And then you have meetings. So we'll have sometimes a meeting before practice where we're doing film, we're going over some sort of team bonding, we're going over team core values. We would read a book as a team together each semester. And so we would have team discussions about that book. So these were like different meeting blocks. So there's another hour of your day gone to soccer. So it's like a minimum of 3 to 4 hours of your day is devoted to your sport and your team. And it's a big commitment. So I don't think a lot of people totally realize that when going to college. And I think that's why a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm done with it after my freshman year or after my first season, because I don't think people really understand that it's all your time. So you have to really love it.
Is it fair to classify it as a job, or is that unfair? I mean, obviously everyone's gonna answer that differently. I think it comes down to their level of passion, desire to
Mhm.
play the game. Um, I think you were able to reach your level for multiple reasons, but I mean, I do know that like you loved the game. So did you ever consider it a job as someone who just, I mean, you just laid out, here's what happens when you play at a potential Division 1 college. Might be some differences here and there depending on the school, right? But like, did so with that right there, did you ever think to yourself like what am I doing? Like, do I want to do this? Like, did you like is a job how you felt at one point in time, or? or no?
Uh, for me, it never felt that way for soccer. For school, it felt like that for me. But for soccer, no, just because I've always loved the sport. For other people, I definitely heard that in the locker room. And like coach would even say that kind of jokingly, like, take care of your bodies, like this is your job, like, get in recovery, like don't do anything stupid over break because like this is your job. Um, and it definitely like is the time of a job. So like for example, if I didn't play sports in soccer, sorry, sports in school, I would have been working. So
Yeah.
like it's the same time commitment. I would just say the way whether it feels like a job or not is just how you approach the sport.
Man, I feel like someone could watch this and just be able to be like the day in the life of a Division 1 soccer player. Is there anything that I haven't asked or touched on that in terms of passing on information to someone who wants to potentially reach the shoes that you were in, or um, anything that comes to mind in terms of like, I would have done this completely different? So I kind of want to leave it open to something that you would like to share, just because I know it comes from such a place of like care, of the individual self. Like, so if you met someone who said, "Hey, Karissa, I want to play for a Division 1 team," and she's like, say, 12 or 13, on the younger side, what would be some of the things? I know it's not just one thing. That's why when I say like mentality, it's just there's so many pieces to the puzzle. But like, what would be some of the things that you would advise someone on that journey?
I've said it before, and people say this all the time, but don't just pick the school because of soccer. So, yes, soccer is a lot of your time there, but the values of the school are going to be reflected in your soccer curriculum.
Hmm.
So, like for me, I had Christian values, but I went to an extremely secular, private, non Christian school. And so, for me personally, that was very difficult. Um, but if those aren't your values, like that's fine. And I actually grew a ton in that environment. I'm thankful for that. Um, but I would say just looking at the school holistically and like maybe reading some of the professors' feedback. Because
Hmm.
honestly, some people that can totally change your academic experiences, like whether you have good relationships with your professors or not. So, yeah.
I end the conversation in two ways. One, I give the participant a chance to flip the script, as I've been saying it kind of jokingly. Do you have a question or two questions that you have for me? Because I know we haven't spoken in such a long time. I actually have learned a lot myself doing this. So, I mean, I'm also grateful just to hear it myself, just so I can pass it on to those that I'm around. But is there a question that you have that has been on your mind from before, or it's something that came up now while we're talking?
I guess maybe like from a coach's perspective, what did you see in me when you recruited me that you were like, hey, that's a good player to have? Or just not to be me specifically. I guess it could be like the general.
No, let's keep it with you because it's actually very interesting. Because I'm curious how you're going to respond to this answer based on everything you just said. Um, you were athletic and you were relentless. I did not recruit you for your technical ability, which is interesting that I say all that because that was still to this day one of the things that you kept working on because you knew you had to work on it. Which then I reflect and say to myself, I should have done a better job of putting you in an environment to really help you grow more in that confidence, in that part of the game. So that's why when you ask that question, it's kind of interesting because that's what a Division 1 coach recruited you for, in terms
Right?
of
So
your
it's like,
athleticism.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what do I tell someone? Yeah, who's,
Well,
and that was, yeah.
I mean, I'll tag
Mhm.
on to that answer. So, um, I would love for you to see me coach these days because I'm totally, hopefully I'd be different, right? Hopefully you evolve
Mhm.
as a person, but um, there's an acronym, and maybe I'll tell you so that way maybe when someone does ask you, maybe you can, depending on how you feel about it. So the acronym is called TIPS: technical, insight, personality, and speed. So technical, trapping a ball, passing a ball, striking a ball, right? Out of the air, on the ground, creating, a deft touch out of a hard pass that came to you. Insight, being able to make great decisions, quick, around those fast division type athletes, reading the game 2-3 steps ahead, knowing what foot to play to, the front foot, the back foot, when do you play a ball in behind, all these different things. Personality, how do you respond when you get knocked down? How do you respond if you get scored on within 10 seconds? How do you respond? Right? Personality. And speed is not necessarily athleticism, it's a part of it, but more about speed of technical ability, speed of thought. And then yes, there is a piece of the athleticism part of it. So I try and help players understand that if you're checking those 4 boxes, like, you're going to be in a pretty good situation. There's so many different other factors that are going involved in it. But those 4 aspects, and then also too, like, your appetite. So there's a reason why I chose this name, because as you're kind of describing, like, you have a high soccer appetite. Like, your appetite for the game, your appetite to train is so unwavering. Like, you always wanted to train. I mean, I remember even when we would train, I mean, you would go nonstop, not just on the ball, but in the weight room, you know, cardio. I mean, running up some hills. I mean, you did everything. So, but I never had to ask you. That's I think what also helped separate you. Um, so yeah, that was a good question. Yeah, do you have anything? Do you have another question or follow up before I get into the last section?
Not right now. Is there
All
something
right.
you wanted? You want me to ask you something?
No, no,
Okay.
it's not about me. I want to keep myself
Uh-huh.
to, actually, Brian didn't ask a question. I was like, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Uh, so some quick fire questions, because some of these I have no idea. So I'm very curious what your answers would be. Um, do you have a favorite soccer team in terms of like a professional team that you follow?
Ugh, I wish I watched more soccer.
Mm,
I never had cable growing up. And so like the TV on in my house was just like not a thing. I'm
mm.
also like super cheap and don't want to pay for a streaming service if I'm being completely honest. But if I did, I do
Uh-huh.
love watching it. Like when I'm at friend's house or like we'll get together to watch a game. I love watching soccer.
Mm,
I did at one point used to really like Chelsea. I think because they played a 3-5-2 at one point, and I was
mm-hmm,
relating with that formation and the outside players.
mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I would like to say I'm more invested in a team, and I'm not.
Just a quick side note: the Chelsea FC women's team has been unstoppable for like a couple years now. Just FYI.
Oh,
Yeah. Uh, favorite food? Because I know you are a huge foodie. I mean, you would. Yeah, I don't want to even tell the stories of the food that I knew that you would eat before training sometimes. But if you had like a meal, like, not your last meal, but just like, oh yeah, like this is just like my standard.
well, I can't afford it, but when I can, I love sushi. So
Mm,
fish, it's like super clean, like high protein, so good. Um, Chicken and rice, I eat all the time.
mm.
And then I really love ice cream, but actually during season, I do not eat dairy or red meat. So we will not be eating ice cream very shortly.
Mm.
Yes.
Favorite movie, like I mean, I actually do know this answer, but I'll let you go ahead and
Yeah.
say it because I know you're so proud.
Wait, I don't think you know the answer to this. Maybe. Okay, I love Remember the Titans. Can't go
Oh,
wrong with a
what?
good sports movie. I love Secretariat and Tangled. What were you thinking?
Harry Potter.
Oh, no. Okay, I love Harry Potter. It's not like
You had like
that's
those
like a whole
marathons, didn't you? Didn't
series.
you like watch
Yeah.
them like all together or like something like that?
I love Harry Potter. I just don't know if it's like top three, top five. So,
Okay, so you said Remember the Titans.
mhm.
Man, that was a
Secret,
great
yeah.
movie.
I know, it's
And what
classic.
was the second one?
Secretariat.
Okay. And then the
Oh, the
third
horse
one?
movie. Tangled.
Tang. Well, is that because you relate with your long,
Yep,
long hair
exactly.
that you
Yeah.
have as well?
She goes barefoot all the time too. I love that. Yeah.
Um, Someone that you look up to. Um, let's say in terms of, let's go with life, not soccer or people. You know,
Yeah. Mhm. There's a couple. Probably my aunt and uncle back home. Yeah. My Aunt Dre and Uncle Billy. They were probably they were a really good example of like a like stable like home life growing up, and like they were super involved in my church and were very invested in me.
mm.
And so that was um yeah, I would say they're a team that I look up to.
If you didn't play on the wing, where else would you play?
Uh Probably center back or center forward. And I've actually played a lot of center forward past last season. It's like I score one goal there, and then coach thinks like that's the best position for me, and it's like I don't think so. But yeah, center forward or center back. Oh.
So okay, I'll do a follow up question. Are you more of a center for? Actually, I probably know the answer, but are you more of a center forward who likes to check in and then create, or are you more like a on the edge of the center back shoulder, kind of looking for that ball into space?
Okay, I prefer the on the edge, looking for the ball in the space.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Obviously, not all teams play that way, and you'd be proud of me. I have improved drastically playing underneath. So,
Hmm.
yep.
I like how you even said that. Very, very language like of the soccer world, playing underneath. That's very good. All right, well, man, I can't tell you how much I am thankful to be able to catch up with you and just kind of hear more about your journey. But this is partly why I would like to do this, is for other people to have learned from your experiences and take away for them the bits and pieces that could help them. I don't think that there's one path. There's multiple paths. And I would like to do a potential summary, and you can chime in. But for someone who came from a divorced family, multiple siblings, 4 to 5 in total,
There's
roughly,
4 siblings, 5 kids.
um, low income, but had a dream of becoming a Division 1 soccer player, very faithful in their faith, and someone who is now carrying that on in their professional life. Um, it's just to sum that up. I mean, it's just such a amazing journey. So I just, is there anything that I missed? That I mean, there's obviously like all the character traits of you, like you're a nature girl, you're very thoughtful and you're very smiley and considerate. But in terms of just like your upbringing and like the roadblocks that you had, I mean, it's just to sum it up for someone who's listening, it's like it's possible. Like you don't have to have all the trainers and all the access to all these different things, especially nowadays, right? I mean you made it, you made it. So I'm proud of you. I'm not sure if I ever told you that, but I am.
Aw, thanks.
So all right, well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it was about just over an hour. I think you told your friend like 30 minutes. I was like, it's not gonna be 30 minutes. Uh, but I will. I'm gonna conclude this, and then I will be in touch very, very shortly. All right.
All right. Thanks,
All
Mike.
right. See you, Carissa.